Recently, I was presented with an opportunity to purchase life insurance, but when I reviewed the disclosures, something didn't sit right with me. Among the fine print, I noticed a clause stating that by signing, I would be agreeing to forfeit certain privacy rights under unspecified federal rules in perpetuity. That means forever. All right. No provision for reversal, no detailed explanation, just a broad, open ended waiver of my rights. This immediately raised red flags for me, not out of paranoia, but out of discernment. When I asked the agent to explain which rights exactly I would be giving up and under which specific federal rules, they couldn't provide a clear answer. And what's worse is the tone of the conversation made me feel like my concerns were being brushed off, as if I was making something out of nothing. As if I was making something out of nothing. But that's exactly the problem. That's how rights are eroded. Not all at once, but through small, insignificant waivers that people are told not to worry about. But I do worry. I do think deeply about what I sign because I've lived long enough. I'm 46 large. I've lived long enough, read enough, and seen enough. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, Highland Park, 313, and seen enough to know how often people, especially people of color like myself, are put in positions where their rights are quietly stripped away under the guise of paperwork. Under the guise of paperwork, excuse me, under the guise of paperwork or standard procedure. And history, let me repeat this again. Because I've lived long enough, read enough, and seen enough to know how often people, especially people of color like myself, are put in positions where their rights are quietly stripped away under the guise of paperwork or standard procedure. And history has shown us time and again that what seems small in the moment can have major consequences down the line. Major. And it reminded me, bear with me, just hear me out. It reminded me of biblical stories like Esau trading away his birthright for a single meal. I mean, my man was hungry. All right? He was hungry. But he carelessly just gave it away. Like, what's the big deal? Or like Adam and Eve, who lost their sovereignty over Eden through a single careless decision. And to me, these weren't just spiritual lessons. They were cautionary tales about how easy it is to give up something sacred without fully understanding the cost. This is the thing right there. Okay, this is the issue right there. How easy it is to give up something sacred without fully understanding the cost. And I was being asked several times, like, but what is it that you see? And I said, that's just it. I don't understand fully what the cost is. It's not even stated here. So why would I sign saying that I agree and understand that which I don't? I do not fully understand the cost. And like the two examples I just gave you, look how carelessly people just gave up in certain situations. The something that was so sacred. Your rights, our rights are sacred. And let me tell you this, to me, it's about sovereignty. It's about sovereignty, all right? Let me, should I even read the definition or should I just continue with my point? Let me quickly read the definition of sovereignty. It describes having supreme power or authority, especially over a territory. It could also mean independent, autonomous, or self-governing. Refers to a supreme ruler, such as a king or queen. Now, there's so many people who want to become ruler or sovereign over something that they feel like is great, but look at such situations as not valuable, meaningless, minuscule, minute. Okay? For me, I focus on sovereignty over myself, over the self, over my rights, over being independent, autonomous in every aspect of my life, not being dependent, being independent. Now, I don't want to be dependent on any company or any person, period. And to me, sovereignty, let me continue my point, is the right to make conscious, informed decisions. It's the foundation of freedom. When a contract asks me to sign away my rights without explanation, that's not protection. It's submission. And the irony is thick. The irony here is thick because I'm being asked to protect my future by sacrificing my rights in the present. Now, I understand. Listen, I get it. I understand that there's been so many people before me that just like they did when they signed these mortgages, thinking that you own that home, when it clearly states in your mortgage. If you don't believe me, go read your mortgage. It says you are leasing. Otherwise, the banks would not be able to come repossess and foreclose on your home if it was yours. See, my own, I own it free and clear. I own it. The land that it sits upon, I own it. The vehicle that I drive, I own it. That's why I'm trying to help people understand why you should invest, so you can continue to make more money and not be dependent upon such, you know what I'm saying? You just have to focus on getting more paper so you could take care of the things that you need and not feel obliged or obligated or dependent upon. Even these jobs, like I told people in many of my live sessions, I was working for the past 10 years as a software engineer, earning a 6-figure salary. But they had me working like a slave, doing 60-hour weeks. They don't even care about the craft itself. They just trying to push products out there, these companies, even if it doesn't work, even if it doesn't, it's crazy. Like, anyway, I understand that many people will see this as overthinking. I know. Or unnecessarily suspicious. Unnecessarily suspicious. But that's because we've been conditioned to normalize surrendering our power, especially in the paperwork. There's so many people that just agree. I told you I've been working as a software engineer for the past 10 years. You know how many people just blindly agree to these privacy rights or these cookies? I'm trying to tell y'all are making a huge mistake, because while you think, oh, it's nothing, when they say this is the license that by using this service, because that's what it'll say. It'll be a prompt that pops up on these web applications. It'll say by proceeding to use this service or this website and such and so forth, you are agreeing. And listen, those of you who might be feeling like you don't have the capacity to read and understand the jargon, copy sections of the user agreement or the privacy statement or these contracts and just paste them in the chat GPT and ask it to explain it to you as it would an 8-year-old. All right, using simple language. If the jargon confuses you, you can do that. And then you can say, You could even paste in and upload an entire PDF. So if you have the ability to download these agreements, these user agreements, these privacy statements, these contractual agreements, if they send it to you electronically and you can download it, you can upload it to ChatGPT or DeepSeek and say, hey, can you check out this section, this page, and let me know what questions I should ask. Let me know what rights I'm sacrificing. Let me know what concerns or who's given the two parties that this contract deals with, meaning the one who's presented the contractual agreement and the one who's would be signing to agree to it. What should be the questions that I should ask? And does this represent my best interest or the party who presented the contract's best interest, or is it a win-win? All right. Get familiar with using technology to do such. If you can't read it, like manually, like I do, because I'll use both. I'll read over it, and then I'll also use, AI. Listen, and like I said, but that's because we've been conditioned to normalize surrendering our power, especially in paperwork. And when I challenge that, people look at me like I'm the problem. This happened to me several times throughout my life. Several times. I will refuse to do business with a company because of such. Because of such. Even when I was living in an apartment, okay, I read every lease agreement, because the moment these folks try to give me a problem or make a problem, I refer right back to those leasing agreements. And when they try to manipulate or change, I keep copies. In this one scenario, leasing company, the leasing office tried to kick me out of the freaking apartment. And this was when I was in my 20s. I'm 46 large. This was when I was in my 20s. But because I read these agreements. And when they be trying to change things and tell me that because they feel like they hold the authority or the power, that they can do this and make a decision off just because, and they try to put me out saying that I violated, these policies or these agreements or, whatever the like. And I went and said, okay, all right. I didn't argue. I didn't throw a fit. I didn't throw a tantrum. I walked down and said, okay, I understand. Thank you. I kept my cool. I kept my cool because that's what it is. I kept my cool and I walked out of the office. I was like, all right. It's like one of them scary movies when it's just like, I'll be back though. Like the Terminator, I'll be back. I just kept it cool. I was just like, all right, cool. I was like, all right, I got you. I was like, no problem, no problem. And I walked out. I walked out of there like that because I already knew what my rights were. And so what I did was I called up the Legal Aid, which is a free legal service. And they got plenty of these right now, go all throughout online. All right. So I called up Legal Aid and I was like, yo, here's the situation. And they couldn't believe it. And it was like, oh, this is an easy one. Easy one. And as soon as I sent over all the information they needed, they reached out to the leasing office and was like, da 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 da. And look at the way they changed up. They just changed up so quickly, profusely apologized, and I was able to stay in the apartment. No issues whatsoever. This is the type of stuff I be talking about. So no. I've seen too much, all right, like I said, to ignore the pattern. I know what it is. Contracts have destroyed careers, families, and entire communities. Not because people were reckless, but because they were uninformed. They were uninformed. And so, no, I won't casually sign something that asks me to give up rights I may not fully even understand. Because doing so wouldn't just be unwise, it would be irresponsible. And if protecting myself means asking the hard questions and refusing to go along with the crowd, I don't do that. I don't just go along just because everybody else is signing. That's why I didn't go get a 30-year mortgage. I'm like, nah, forget that. I'm going to stack up and I'm gonna just buy my crib, period. And I'm gonna keep stacking, and I'm gonna renovate my crib. And that's exactly what I did. Now I got equity and I own it, free and clear. Got a little card that they give you. When you get a HELOC, they give you a card. You use it just like a debit or a credit card. It's crazy. So I can, at any moment, if I need to go buy me a new vehicle, let's say my vehicle breaks down. I got the cash to just go buy me a vehicle. But if I didn't, I could just go swipe. Be like, yeah, I want that right there on the lot right there. I could just go buy another crib. I could put down a down payment or just go buy another one and rinse and repeat. That's sovereignty. That's sovereignty. That's wisdom. That's knowledge. That's understanding. That's responsible. If you go watch, listen, let me tell y'all this. I don't know how many of y'all seen. Listen, I just want to say this really quick. It reminded me of like what I'm just talking about. It reminded me, and then I'm gonna wrap this up. It reminded me of the scenes in Cadillac Records. I don't know how many of y'all seen this, all right? And we know about these countless situations with, you know, man, the various. I'm gonna just tell y'all this. Listen, this scene I had went to go pull this up on the internet just to make sure I remember the characters' names. Okay, so in Cadillac Records, there was this character called Muddy Waters. All right, if you've seen it, you already know. And then Lil Walter. All right, and they signed these contracts that gave them the illusion of success. They was basically getting new Cadillacs. They had the fame and access, but ultimately left them broke and dependent, and repeatedly begging Leonard Chess, which was the owner of Cadillac Records, for help. Meanwhile, Howlin' Wolf, which is this big dark-skinned black dude, had this real good talent, you know what I mean? This dope talent, all right, as an artist. And when Chess seen him, he was like, yo, da-da-da. He was like, yo, I'm gonna get you this. And he pulled up in the wolf that is, pulled up in his raggedy beater, you know what I mean? But it worked, it was functional. It was functional. And when Chess said to Wolf, hey man, let me get you this, and I just want you to sign this, Wolf was like, He refused to be so easily bought. And he knew better. He was like, nah. And his exact phrase was, I refuse to borrow against the stone. I refuse to borrow against the stone. And now this is a Southern term or phrase that I wasn't familiar with. I kind of, understood it a little bit, like comprehended it a little bit based on the context, but I went to go look it up, right? I Googled it. What he was saying essentially is why would I borrow about something that could potentially happen or not happen in the future and bank on that, which will leave me dependent upon you and in debt. You see this vehicle? And that's what he pointed. He said, I own that right there. I don't owe nobody nothing. All right, so I don't owe nobody anything. I'm free and clear across the board. I don't owe nobody nothing. That contrast stuck with me, all right? It's not just a movie. It reflects countless real life stories where artists, creators, and everyday people knowingly signed away their rights, their likeness, their creative control, even their ability to speak their truth, often for something that seemed beneficial at the time. We're talking about instant gratification versus sacrificing for the long haul, the long term. All right, sacrificing the immediate instant gratification for the true, the real. And only later do they realize what they gave up. For many of y'all might even know about NBA Youngboy. NBA Youngboy. He signed a 5-record deal. They took this man's, they played this man, this young man. All right. And I'm glad to hear that but he's one. He's the exception to the rule. He is one of the many that finally got a huge deal with a new record label. He signed a 5-record deal with the former company, and he ended up making giving them 10 records. I think 15 records, 15 albums, 15, and they still wouldn't pay this man. until a new company came along and offered him the real money that he deserved. And then they tried to offer him and say, all right, well, da 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 da. He was like, nah, you know what, I'm done. I'm out of here. And he getting his just due. But I'm telling y'all, man, listen, they realized what they gave up later, while the businesses that drafted those agreements continue to profit forever, and their family is eating forever, while your family remains poor. We talking about your rights, and you're giving it away in perpetuity, even in many of these cases, and you don't even know and realize. And it also makes me think of how our ancestors, and I'm wrapping up with this, how hard they fought, marched, struggled, and bled just for us to have these rights and dignity we have today. And yet here we are being asked to just casually give up some of those rights again, not through violence or overt oppression, but through paperwork, man. Through paperwork. Quietly, legally, permanently. That's why I question these things, not out of fear, but out of respect. Respect for myself and for those who came before me and for those who will come after me, because I refuse to be another example of someone who signed away something priceless just because everyone else said it was no big deal. I do not do that. And if y'all want to hear about this, I'm done. I'm done. But I do want to add something about sovereignty. So if you want to go about your day, go ahead and do that. But about sovereignty, really quick, to me, what I feel like sovereignty means beyond that definition, the right and responsibility to govern myself, to make conscious, informed decisions without coercion, confusion, or manipulation. It's about ownership, as I just mentioned earlier. Ownership over my choices, my body, my likeness, my legacy, and ultimately my freedom. I'm not doing this just so I could be tied to somebody else. That's why I take issues with any document or contract from any company, especially one tied to something as serious as life insurance, that asks me to sign away my rights vaguely and permanently under unspecified federal rules. That's not sovereignty. That's surrender, as I said before. And I can't, in good conscience, give away my sovereignty without fully understanding what I'm sacrificing and why. As a person of color, I know firsthand how fragile our rights can be. And I've seen how often our communities are pressured into signing things that seem harmless but carry long-term consequences. And we're offered short-term benefits, access, acceptance, comfort, but in exchange, we're often stripped of control, silenced, or bound to terms we didn't fully grasp. Sovereignty isn't just political or spiritual, man. It's deeply personal. It's what our ancestors fought for, what many lost their lives to secure. And I won't dishonor that fight by treating it casually. So when someone asks me what I'm afraid of, the answer is simple. I'm not afraid, I'm aware. Aware of how systems work. Aware of the value of my rights. And I'm aware of how easily sovereignty can be taken just like that if we're not vigilant in protecting it. And I'm done. I'm dropping the mic right here. It's your man Ace. I'm out.